In today's video, we'd like to look at the life of one of Russia's greatest writers and how he rose from the abyss of life to become a master in his field. Born in 1860 to a father who was a drunk and who took some form of weird delight in beating his children almost every day with the idea that he was teaching them humility, Anton Chekhov only knew fear, timidity, and terror growing up. He also had to watch over his father's business under the freezing Russian conditions. When his father went home to rest in his father's office, he often had to deal with lewd women and ill-mannered men, only to come home to a loveless atmosphere. Years later, following his father's bad financial decision, the man fled home to Moscow to stay with his older sons, leaving Anton and his mother to clean up his financial troubles behind him. After a while, Anton's mother also left the town to join her family in Moscow, and Anton was left behind to fend for himself. Their house was bought over, and he was given a tiny spot to lay his head at night. At this point, his only option was to sink into despondency. But did he do that? Certainly not. With no parental figures to cater to his needs, the young man began to work hard to survive and to at least keep a meal in his stomach. He eventually began to love the ethics of hard work and discovered the joy of reading. He found a world where he could escape from the harsh realities of his life and live in the pages of his books. He would eventually start writing and gradually turn his life around when he discovered that his lineage was filled with pain, as his ancestors had served as slaves for a long time. He was able to forgive his father and love him instead. He would later join his family in Moscow and became a vital force of revolution, getting his brothers back on their feet to face their careers and getting them off alcoholism. He also made sure to live his life to the fullest, even after being diagnosed with tuberculosis. He eventually died, leaving behind his legacy in both his family and in the literary world. The amazing story of Anton leaves a vital lesson for every one of us. It tells us that at the end of the day, we are what we decide to become. It demonstrates to us that no one and no circumstance have the ultimate power to decide our fate unless we empower them to do so. We must understand that our perspective and attitude, which is really our preset approach to things, events, and people, would determine what happens to us at the end of the day. In this video, we would take a look at what negative and positive attitudes do to us, and how we can switch to make the best of our lives, career, and other life endeavors. Before we delve into this, we must establish the fact that our views of things differ from each other. No two people ever look at the world or things from the same perspective. This may be a result of our preset pessimism or optimism about a thing. It may also be because of our past experience or lack of experience about that thing. An optimist would naturally see positives in things, but a pessimist would do the exact opposite. Now, let us look at the two broad perspectives that all humans have. Negative attitude. Because of the uncertainty that comes with life, vulnerable and weak-minded people would almost always naturally adopt a narrow view and interpretation of things. This leads to a phobia of facing the real world. And over time, other traits based on this narrow, myopic manner emerge. The hostile attitude. People with a negative attitude to life have been exposed to hostility of some sort, and after a while, they make themselves the sources of that same hostility, as they no longer want to be victims. They could start out as bullies when younger, and evolve into conniving manipulators. They would usually never work for the greater good of the team. All they want to prove is that no one likes them, and that they are victims. They would then seek revenge for being victims. The anxious attitude. These kinds of people expect nothing but opposition and obstacles, and so they create systems that limit the occasion for such obstacles. Almost all perfectionists and micromanagers would fall into this category. The only place that they feel comfortable is around those that they have completely subdued. The moment they leave the places where they are not in charge, they fall apart and become fearful. Sometimes this attitude is demonstrated through what they would call love and care. but it binds people. Their demonstration of love is largely born out of the fear of losing control over their loved ones. A case in point was the mother of US President Franklin Roosevelt, who wanted her son to basically stop living when he contracted polio. The avoidant attitude. These kinds of people project their insecurities, born out of a sense of lack of competence. They would gladly avoid anything that has the ability to put a dent in their self-esteem. To continuously perpetuate this trait, they never lack who to blame for their shortcoming. They could easily blame it on alcoholism or some other vice that is responsible for limiting them. They would also never seriously commit to anything worthwhile, as their flaws are likely to show up. These kinds of people can be easily identified by their short-lived relationships and employment history. If you identify any of the above attitudes in your life, you would need to deal with these by giving yourself wholly to a cause and seeing to its end. Be willing to endure the criticism, which may never even come. Begin with the smallest of tasks, and be sure to stick with it. Drop the perfectionist front, and admit your flaws, even as you realize that all men are flawed, and you are not the only one with that imperfection. The good attitude. This divergent and more embracing view of life and circumstances is what we should all strive for. Some of the views we must adopt to prevent self-sabotage would include some of the following things we want to look at briefly. The world. We are supposed to view the world with the eyes of an explorer. This means ideas must be scrutinized and not allowed to dictate the entire course of our lives. We must realize that we stand before a vast universe and be willing to learn, relearn, and unlearn, so that we do not carry on with outdated and irrelevant knowledge simply because we are too scared to leave our comfort zones of knowledge. Be willing to stay open-minded, as this will cause your creative energies to flow without restraints. Adversity. While a lot of people want to steer clear of all forms of adversities, this is not the right approach. Life would almost always come with challenges, frustrations, hateful people, and more. When life subjects you to an unfavorable situation, deploy your inner energy to deal with the frustration. Be like the 1920s actress Joan Crawford, who asked for a different type of role from her usual stereotyped roles, only to draw the ire of her producer. He ended up casting her in a worse role. Instead of complaining about how unfair he was to her, she decided to work hard at the role, and eventually fell in love with the role. In the end, she became a better actress with increased skill set. Yourself. Your view about yourself should in no way be arrogant, but if you would borrow from the 82nd Psalm in the Bible, it referred to certain men as gods. Of course, this doesn't defy them or make them worthy of worship. However, it might point to the fact that there is a godlike nature in man that needs to be explored. You must have a healthy estimation of yourself and believe in your contribution to the world. This is one of the ways that ancient world rulers thought about themselves. Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar were known to have believed that they were part divine and superhuman. Although they went the way of all mortal men, they conquered their world in their times. At the end of the day, we can rise from any circumstance and, like Anton, get to the pinnacles of our careers and life whilst meaningfully contributing our quota of greatness to the world. This way, we might also know how to make the best of our lives by paying the relevant price for success and avoiding the easy pathway for watching.